It's good to see all of you. We're so excited to have you here. I think I'm just going to get into it since we only have an hour together today, and I know everyone would probably like to stay on time. This is our 12th CFE community chat since April. And the second one of what we're calling our fall engagement series. So we know how busy and exhausted you all must be after every single workday. And we're just so happy that you chose to spend some time with us today. So thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are new to CFE, I'm Sarah Hoppy-Knight. I'm the co-executive director of the organization. We are a Chicago-based education nonprofit that has been around for more than 35 years, supporting and funding CPS educators so that they can best serve their students and grow in their craft. In a typical school year, which this is not, of course, but in a typical year, we award about 400 grants and fellowships to CPS pre-K through 12th grade educators. You can learn a lot more about us on our website. We have a couple of other things going on currently in addition to the fall engagement series. And if you're not currently on our newsletter list and following us on social media, we encourage you to do both of those things. A few quick notes before we get started today. I know everyone's very familiar with Zoom and other video meeting platforms at this point, but just remember to keep your microphones muted throughout the actual presentation. And if you have questions during the presentation itself, just pop them in the chat box and we'll try to get to some of those at the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Also, today's session is being recorded and it will be posted along with the slide deck and any associated resources on our website within the next few days. Kayla, my program associate, will be popping in various messages throughout the course of the chat, and she will include that link in the chat as well. So let's get into it. Today we have two presenters from the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum. Each year the museum provides educators with more contact hours of science teaching and learning support than any other museum in the city. They reach over 50,000 students and 1,500 teachers using living and preserved collections, as well as the Nature Museum's conservation work. Through both in-school and out-of-school time opportunities for Chicago students and teachers, the museum educators impact the community by building knowledge, skills, interest, and enthusiasm for STEM topics. Museum education programs are founded in an inquiry-based approach to connecting our audiences to local nature and science concepts. And with that, I will turn it over to today's presenters, who are Amy Morton and Yukako Kawakatsu. Thank you both for being here.
Hi, I can go ahead and start. I'm Amy Morton. I'm the Teacher Programs Manager at the Nature Museum, and I'm also going to post something in the chat. We're going to be working in a Google Slides document today. If you'd care to join us, you can, or you can just watch the screen. That's fine.
Awesome. I'm going to start my share screen. I'm Yukako Kawakatsu, Education Programs Coordinator. And I think we might have one more person from our team that's joining us. Anna, do you want to say hi?
Hello, I am just here supporting, and I'll be in and out of the chat, so you might hear my voice just summarizing if you wanted to share anything in the chat. Hi, everyone.
Great. So I think Yukako is going to get us started today, and this document should be an editable document, and once you jump into this document, we should be able to see you on whatever slide you're in, and you can sort of see where everybody is. And on a few slides, you'll be able to type into the slide, and if you don't want to type in, that's fine too. You can just type into the chat. So I'll let Yukako get us started, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. So I did just update the Google Slides so that people can edit it. You might need a little refresh before you can edit, but I thought we could start off our chat today by thinking about personal collections, something that you or your students collect, And you can tell us about those ideas either in the chat or on slide 3. There's some blue squares, we call them our post-it notes, but if people want to type some ideas in there. You're also welcome to share it in the chat, and then one of us can share out. Well, I'm seeing things in the chat. Let's see. I'm seeing some nature ideas, some rocks in a 6th grade classroom. That's awesome.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, what you were just summarizing, Yukako, Linda Brown, adds to a class collection. I wonder what else is in the class collection.
I'm seeing some other ideas on slide 3. Awesome. Feel free to keep adding ideas, maybe collections that aren't happening yet, but maybe you hope to have in the future as we talk about our own museum collections today. Awesome. So I think I'm going to go into present mode. I think that might be a better view for folks. So this is just a quick overview of our agenda today. We'll talk a little bit about our museum collections and then connect that to our own neighborhoods and using real objects in science teaching. And then we'll talk a little bit about equity-focused science teaching. Awesome. I think we're okay on the Zoom tip, so I'm just going to keep zooming along. So again, we're here from the Peggy Notebaert Nature Museum. This is our museum building in Lincoln Park. And our museum mission is to create a positive relationship between people and nature through collaborations, education, research, and collections, exhibits, and public forums that foster urban connections to our region's nature and science. And so when we're thinking about our mission and all the teaching and learning that we do through our museum, we ground our programs and our development in our 4 museum learning approaches. The first of which is using real things. So for us, what that looks like is we get to engage our audience with our living and preserved specimens so that our students get to engage with real objects and engage in local real world phenomena. Our second learning approach is the learning ecosystem. So we really strive to connect in and out of school learning so that students are making holistic connections and have learning experiences that tie together all their personal experiences that they're having. Our third museum learning approach, student-centered instruction. We design our learning programs with this in mind so that our students are asking the questions and doing the figuring out and doing the heavy lift when we think about science learning. And then our fourth is whole child learning. The idea that science education isn't just about content, but also the attitudes and behaviors that encourage our students to engage with and think more deeply about the world that's around them. Awesome. So to introduce our museum collections, we have a short 2-minute video. I can try to play it this way. If it's not working, we can do a pause and have folks just play it on their end, but maybe I'll try it and we can see what that looks like.
I think the audio is actually a little shakier than I thought originally.
Ooh, okay. Maybe then it's a short 2-minute clip. If folks want to watch it from the Google Slide link on mute, and then we can come back and then carry on with our ideas. Awesome. If maybe you have a bit of the video to go, maybe you can save that link and we can add that link in the chat maybe so people can take a look at it again. I'm gonna go back to our present mode, here we go. So I hope the video gave you a little peek into our collections. So we have a really vast collection, and if you've ever been to our nature museum, only about 2% of the specimens from our collections are actually on exhibit. And the rest of our collections are in, like in the video showed, at our Ravenswood facility. And our collections actually have lots of different kinds of things in them. And these are just some examples. Our collections include birds, their nests, some reptiles, insects, mammals, fossils, and other artifacts. And so, yeah, our collections really are interdisciplinary. Our collections are focused in terms of region in the Midwest and the Western Great Lakes, but we do have specimens from across North America. And our collections date back to the 1830s to the present. And some of the things in our collections are like super local. So if you take a look at the specimen tag that goes along with these mussel shells, these were found in Lincoln Park, Chicago. We also have things in our collections that we see every day. So these are some fox squirrels and gray squirrels. And then things that are really rare and even extinct. So like the Carolina parakeet, which is now extinct, and the ivory-billed woodpecker. And so our collections preserves things that we might see every day, but then also things, right, that we can really only see in collections now. Awesome. And so our collections, we get to use them in our education programs, but they're also used for research. And I'll leave you guys with this thought about our collections, that our collections reflect the values, our values, right? And at the same time, though, what's in our collections will continue to inform our values in the future as they get used in research and in education in other ways. And with that idea about our collections, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
All right. So if you're in the slides document, I'm on slide 18, and you, Kako, can help us follow along with that by presenting, because I can see that a lot of people are not in the slides document, so that's great. So when we go to a museum, we can see these wonderful collections that other people have collected. And one of the things that collections in a lot of museums show is that people are really interested in the natural world and the world around them. And so we can connect ourselves with the natural world by looking all around us, and we can connect our students with the natural world by looking all around us. So one of the things that we might want to do right now is just look out the window. So what you're seeing right here is exactly what I see when I look out my window. So I wonder if people could maybe drop in the chat a couple of things that they see when they look out their window. Something, either a natural object or an event, a natural event that you notice out your window. Of course, we're in Chicago, so there are a lot of man-made things happening outside of our window, but any natural things happening out your window right now? Oh, leaves changing color. Right, and so the metro tracks with the trees around them. So the metro tracks have lots of nature up and down, right? Okay, blue sky. Even when you look at the sky, there's a lot of things happening, even in the sky, and the sun is going down. So all of that, noticing and wondering about the natural world, what you can do is when you look outside and you see leaves changing, that can send you down a path of tons and tons of questions. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to think about, when we look outside, what does that inspire us, and how can we connect with the objects and the events that are happening outside? So on slide 20, When we look out my window, we can see, I can see those red leaves, and I've been noticing that those leaves have been red all summer. So I'm thinking, are those leaves going to change like the other leaves, the green and the yellow leaves that I'm seeing when I look out the window? And also when I look at the window, I see a lot of stuff on the ground, and that makes me very curious. There are some other things that some pictures that we've taken when we've walked around the Nature Museum. And so on the next slide, a little walk around the Nature Museum in the fall can sometimes, you can see some butterflies roosting. We can see a lot of vegetation, a lot of flowers and in the prairie, and that is just changing all spring and summer long. If we look a little bit more closely, we can see the different types of interactions with the different plants that are around the Nature Museum. So if we walk around the Nature Museum, we can see so many different types of things outside and inside. On the next slide, what we'll notice on slide 24, when we think about objects, sometimes we think of a single object, but sometimes we want to think about stuff. We might want to be collecting it, but usually what's happening is we're wanting to take a closer look. So these are some quotes that come from some papers about some studies about objects. They can easily spark questions. We've talked about that already. And those questions are a stepping stone to critical thinking. And one of the things that's great about objects is they are not tied to age, language, or literacy level. They are a really great way for students to connect with things that they see and also to connect with each other. When we say democratizing, what we really mean is it's a starting point where everyone is at the same starting point. And so with that, students really gain a lot of confidence that their curiosity is a valuable trait and that they don't have to know a lot of stuff when they're interacting with these objects. So in slide 25, what we try to do with our activities in our curricula or in our teacher PD or in our programming with students or adults at the Nature Museum is we try to use activities that model the way that scientists interact with real things. Scientists are the ultimate in curious people, and they're wanting to collect things, look more closely. And these are some pictures of the things that we can see some of our scientists at work. We can see some objects that they've collected and recorded, and some ways that things are organized in the museum itself. So I was curious about all of the stuff that I saw outside. So I went outside, and on slide 26, what you'll see is a collection of stuff that I got when I went outside. And so I just put a bunch of stuff in a bag and I brought it in and spread it out. And there is quite a variety here. And I made a lot of assumptions when I looked through this stuff. So what we'll do is let's take a little bit of time to think about how we might look more carefully at some of these things. So when we interact with objects, sometimes we want to pick them up, we want to touch them and feel them, and we might want to use our senses. We might want to maybe smell them or see what kind of textures we feel, but our eyes are really helpful in gathering information. And so on slide 27, you'll see that scientific drawing, and if you've ever done a Nature Museum program before, you've probably done some scientific drawing, but scientific drawing is a great way to examine and explain through close observation. And you can see that this drawing on the right is about 100 years old. It's part of the museum collection. And this particular scientist was all around Illinois collecting lots of information about the plants and wild places that he observed in Illinois. And what we know about students is that when students start to draw, they start to be able to figure things out and notice things that they haven't noticed before. So in slide 28, there are a few sort of rationale behind encouraging scientific drawing and encouraging drawing as a way to either observe closely or to figure something out. So sometimes we might have students be drawing something that they observe. Sometimes we might have students draw something that they can't observe because they can't see it, and we're asking them to sort of guess what's happening and make some assumptions. You can see that the drawings can include color or not, and labels and words are really helpful in adding to the explanation. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a minute and do a little bit of drawing. So on slide 29, what you'll notice is some objects that come from that collection that came from outside. So if you have a piece of paper around, even if it's just a Post-it, grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen or whatever you happen to have around, and we'll take about 2 minutes to draw one of these objects. So you can see that there are 5 objects on this page. So just choose one to draw, and I'll give you about 2 minutes. If you think you're done drawing, that's a good time to look a little bit more closely and find another detail to add to your drawing. You have about a minute of drawing. If you feel like you're done, you can either add another detail or you can try to draw another object. Okay, great. So hopefully we've gotten a careful look at some of these objects, and maybe you could share in the chat anything that you noticed when you were looking closely that you hadn't noticed originally, or something that you thought was interesting about one of these objects. Maybe you have a question about one of these objects. All right, someone is noticing some spots. Maybe you were noticing the outline to begin with, and then when you looked carefully, you saw some spots that you didn't see before. Great. Yeah, the shadows are really interesting, aren't they? Yep, some internal patterns that are really interesting. Right, exactly. And so when we look at these objects, it might inspire us to find similar objects. It might inspire us to look more carefully. Maybe we want to look at the other side, or maybe we want to compare these objects to other objects. So there are a lot of things that we could do with our students even with objects like this. So now we're going to think a little bit about what other types of things can we do with these objects? What other activities can we do besides just draw? All right, so on slide 30, we're back to a big mess of objects. Okay, and one of the things that especially younger students like to do is to sort things. So let's think about two groups. Okay, if you were going to sort these objects into two groups, what two groups might you sort these objects into? Okay, we could sort by color. Sort by shape. If you sorted by shape, what two groups would you make? Okay, so we've got smooth leaf edges and jagged leaf edges, quantity, okay, leaves and twigs. All right, sometimes we could let students just sort into two groups, and it's really interesting to see the types of ways that they sort. Even when we do this activity with teachers and they sort, it's also the same thing. So this is something that seems sort of early elementary, but sometimes when you're doing some classifying like this, it can be a really rich activity. All right, if we jump to slide 31, okay, the other thing that we can do is oftentimes what students want to know is what is it or what does it do? So if we're looking at these two objects, we have an object on the left and an object on the right, we might have an initial explanation, right? We might look at it and we say, I know what this is. And then we think we're done, right? So if you look at these, do you have any initial explanation about what is it or what does it do? About the left one or the right one? So I know I'm going to type something in what I first thought when I. Great. And leaves and twigs, that might be what we think is happening here, right? So sometimes then what happens is then we look a little bit closer. We might want to look more carefully at the rest of the collection or a little bit more closely at the object itself. So what I did was I kept sorting through the collection and I discovered some things that gave me some clues. So if we jump to slide 32, these are objects that are similar to the objects and related to the objects in slide 31, but these objects give me a little bit more information. What other kind of information am I getting from these objects that I didn't have before? I can see some different parts and different shapes. And now we have kind of a revised explanation. What kind of ways might I revise my explanation once I look at these objects that are related to the other objects? Any ideas? Great. So I can see the one on the left. My initial explanation was Not correct. It wasn't pine needles. Right. It looks more like little twigs or something. Mm-hmm. Right. And then on the right, it looks like a leaf, but it seems like it has another part attached to it. And so maybe it has another function. Right? Okay. So if we think about the other types of activities, we can find out, we can keep finding out about the objects themselves. We can sort them, we can compare them, we can group them, we can compare them to each other. We could even take them apart, right? But then what we might want to do is we might want to think about what can we learn about the place where these objects came from. So we have these objects are a little bit sorted now, and we can maybe recognize a few, and it gives us some ideas about the place where these objects came from. Any ideas about what we might now know by looking at these objects about the place where these objects came from? What might we infer or guess about the place where these objects came from? Okay. If we know anything about leaves, we might guess where in the country it was. Okay, we can tell that there are a variety of trees in this area, right? We can tell that sort of what season it is. That's something about the place. Right, exactly. And if you can recognize what's up in the upper right-hand corner of that image, you might even be able to tell what type of trees are there. So we've incorporated some activities that are similar to this into some of our curricula. And sometimes what we like to do with students, okay, might have been found in a field. Great. So what we sometimes do with students is we look a little bit, yeah, you can do that, Yukako. We like to look at when we are talking about variety of trees, what we're really talking about is biodiversity. So when we're speaking with elementary students, we might want to talk about a variety of plants. When we're speaking with middle school students, we might want to use the word biodiversity. And you can see that those are the same idea, but they're we're just building on those ideas. So we have a few different types of plants in this particular picture, and we're simulating a sampling in this activity. And so students might want to count what type of each, what the number of each type of plant. So if we have this particular plant right here, you might recognize a maple leaf or an oak leaf. We could count those plants. You might recognize some garlic mustard. So you can see that there's a few different types of plants here, and we can count how many of each type. If you want students to do that in the natural environment, on slide 35, we have sort of the instructions for doing this outside. And it's really similar. You could use a hula hoop or a piece of string to mark an area. And then in that area, you look for the different types of plants that are in that area. And then you count how many of each type of plant there are. And by drawing each type of plant, students don't need to know the names of the plants, but they can still collect some data about the area itself. This is a great activity to do in 2 different areas that are close by to see if they're similar or different. And then if we want to extend that activity and that idea, on slide 36, what we'll notice is that iNaturalist, which is an app for your phone, is another way to collect biodiversity data for an area. So it's so interesting when you look at the Chicago data. For iNaturalist, there are some spots where there's lots and lots of data, and often that's right around schools. And so you can use iNaturalist with students to collect data about biodiversity just by taking an image and using the AI in the iNaturalist to help them identify what that image actually is. iNaturalist can identify plants and animals and birds, and I think even fungi. So, all right. So that's sort of a little bit of an overview of the types of ways that you can use objects in the classroom. You can use objects collected by yourself or your students. And I'm wondering if this gives you any ideas about the types of objects you might want to have your students interacting with, maybe some things that you might want to have in your classroom or you might want students to collect at home, or what subject might you use this exploration in? So if you want to type some ideas into the chat about if these types of activities spark any activities that you might want to do with your students in your head, you can share those ideas. Identifying plants and trees. There are some great field guides that you can use for that. Letting students loose with the field guide is really fun. Scavenger hunts. Okay. Right, so connecting students with ecology through biodiversity activities is really great. We always talk about that idea that they will care for it when they connect with it, right? And when they feel connected to these plants and animals outside, then they are inclined to want to preserve. So that's right. Great. All right. So the Nature Museum, as we've noticed, we do serve lots and lots of different classrooms all over the city. And so Yukako is going to walk us through a little bit about how we think about all of the audiences that we serve.
Awesome. So yeah, thinking of the very wide audience that we serve, we want to make sure that we're providing science teaching and learning that's equity focused. So thinking about that, the equity goals that are outlined in these 3 documents, the CPS Curriculum Equity Initiative, the True Framework, and the NGSS Appendix D. And reflecting on all the really cool instructional strategies and activity ideas that Amy just modeled through. These are some examples on the right side of instructional strategies that meet these equity goals. So using a local focus or a neighborhood connection. So allowing your students to make connections to the science that's happening really, really close to them that they can connect to. Providing opportunities for hands-on activities, So manipulating real objects, really looking closely at them. And then providing opportunities for students to do the sense making, So making an initial explanation and then getting to revise it as they found out more. And then having your students work together to build consensus, around the common experiences that they're having. And so these three equity frameworks sort of outline three big buckets of goals. So the first one, eliminating barriers that stratify. So making sure that we're designing accessible learning environments with entry points for all of our students. The second, creating personal connections and shared experiences for all learners. We've touched on that idea a little bit, right? We want to make sure that the science that our students are engaging with, they can see, right, in their lives and have personal connections to them. And then the third, deepen engagement and promote cognitive rigor. So having our students, right, do the thinking and the heavy lifting as they make sense of the science and the real world that's happening around them. Awesome. So we touched on this already, but using real objects is a really powerful instructional strategy when we think about equity. We know that using real objects provides a common entry point for all of our students. We're not relying on students' prior knowledge to drive the experience and the learning that's happening, right? Our students are getting to engage with real things and getting to contribute their own observations and their own thinking. And because they're all interacting with that objects, right, we can really have an opportunity to allow students to express what they're thinking, do the sense making, and then they're getting to collaborate, right, to do that iterative thinking as they explore that objects. And then another instructional strategy that we really wanted to highlight was this local focus. So we wanted to sort of illustrate this idea through one of the disciplinary core ideas from the NGSS, which is about biodiversity and humans. And when we think about biodiversity, we can think about biodiversity happening in lots of places, right? But if that's the case, why not make that science really local and really focused in the science that's happening where our students are? So looking at the biodiversity that's in our backyard, right? The different things that are there and how they interact, right? Different living things interact with their environment. We can expand that, right? Local view a little bit to the city, maybe to Chicago, right? Looking at the populations of things that live in Chicago and how maybe changes in those habitats affect the organisms that live there. We can expand a little bit more to Cook County and then even to the state level, Illinois, right? Thinking about the biodiversity that's local to us and allowing our students to build their understanding, right, of biodiversity and how humans interact with them through experiences that they can also have, right? That using examples that they can see out their window or maybe they're familiar with in the city. And what that does is it allows our students to build their knowledge from experiences and personal connections, and then apply them, right, to these science ideas that are happening far away. So when we think about biodiversity, we sometimes think about the rainforest, right? And all of our students might not have seen the rainforest before, but if we give them an opportunity to build their understanding of biodiversity and the different living things and their environments, right, we can ask them to continue to add to that knowledge and connect what they know locally to science that is far away. And then, so we have some quotes from our audiences. So these instructional strategies and equity, right, strategies that we were talking about, does it matter to students and to teachers? And what we're hearing is yeah, it does, right? We hear students, right, telling us that the data that they're collecting, right, had value in their research project and their understanding. We're hearing that students, right, are really enjoying interacting with real objects and pushing them to want to know more and seek out knowledge and ask questions. And the different activities that we're incorporating, right, drawing and analyzing data and things like that are really engaging for our students and allowing them to develop the understanding of those big science ideas. Awesome. I might turn it over to Amy to share some of our Nature Museum resources with us.
Great. So I also have a leaf blower outside my window, so I'll mute if that gets too loud. So one of the things that I was wondering as we looked at some of these equity issues do these spark any ideas for you in making sure that you're able to use objects to engage all of the learners in your class? Have you had some experience doing that, or do any of these activities or ideas that we've presented so far, from an equity perspective, what kind of connections or ideas do you have about ways to make sure that all of your learners are engaged as you're teaching? So I'm going to let you type for about a minute while there's some leaf blowing going outside. Some ideas in the chat about engaging all learners. All right. Great. So when we think about engaging all learners, sometimes we're engaging learners at different levels. Sometimes we have multiple grades, and sometimes we have learners who are learning in different languages, and objects are a really great way to bring them all together and to help them to develop that shared vocabulary and shared understanding. So some of the resources that you might want to use to connect your students with some of these natural things that are happening in their neighborhoods, and some activity ideas that you might want to be using with your students. There are a couple of digital resources, lots of digital resources. We've been developing digital resources all summer, and starting in the spring, and then developing a lot of digital resources over the summer to connect students and teachers and families and adults to the nature that's happening either in the museum while the building is closed, by our scientists who are doing work in the field all over the Chicagoland area, and also things that are happening on the grounds of the museum. So you can connect with Wonder at Home, which is a whole series of newsletter style activities. A more recent addition is Curious by Nature, which is a video series that leads you through some explorations. If we go to the next slide, you can also access something a little bit more recent was the Flutter into Fall, one of our butterfly connected activities that was happening. And you can still connect with those materials through the Nature Museum website, and the Nature Museum blog has a lot of videos and ideas from the education department, from the guest experience, and from collections. And so there is probably something for everybody on the Nature Museum website. It has a lot of things that aren't just download a worksheet. It's lots of really interconnected things that are full of opportunities to notice and wonder. I'm gonna take a quick look over at the chat. Great, so I'm glad that people are, it looks like there's some connecting to this idea that this hands-on authentic engagement is really important for all learners, and I think that's really great. We are actually also doing field trip experiences now, and that's another thing that you can connect to. They're virtual field trip experiences, but it's a live experience, so it's a workshop type of an experience. Great. All right. So we have a couple more minutes for questions if you want. And then we also, on our next slide, You can see our emails. You can always get in touch with us that way. So if anybody else has any more questions, anything we can answer about the program we just did or about the Nature Museum in general, those are fine too.
And really
feel
quick,
free to-
I'm
sorry,
so
go
sorry.
ahead. No, it's fine.
I was going to say in the chat is a link that will direct you directly to the virtual field trips, and feel free to peruse our website for all those resources that Amy and Yukako were just mentioning as well.
And if there are any questions, feel free, as Amy mentioned, to pop them in the chat, or we have such a small group, you're welcome to just speak up if you have a question or if you have an interest in a specific resource that you think they might be able to provide. We have about 5 more minutes, so plenty of time to address a couple questions.
I have a question. Should I put it in the chat?
No, you can just ask right here if you don't mind.
I really like this idea, and it was someone else who kind of like led me to this. And a little disappointed that you guys can't come out to the schools and like do like field trips in the schoolyard, but understood. But really want to know about the getting in touch with the monarch migration and spreading the schools having like milkweed patches so that we're part of helping the monarchs make their way from Mexico to Canada and back every year. So I wondered if you guys had, I have been all over the website. I mean, it is amazing. And all of the field trips seem to fit perfectly with the units in science and social studies, the grade levels I cover.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious if you guys are aware of any outreach for building habitats in the school for butterflies.
Well, we heard that someone might have this question, and in the summer we run something called Monarchs Club, and so we won't run that again till next. I think we do the trainings and stuff in the summer, so it's a summer program. But the other thing that schools can also connect to is the Illinois Department of Natural Resources has a grant that goes to schools. It's called a pollinator habitat grant, and it's to provide schools with some funding to buy the plants and things that they need to build a pollinator habitat around their school somewhere. And if you wanted to email me directly, this is Amy. So if you wanted to email me directly, I can send you some information about that. When I was in the classroom, I did that with my class, and it was really interesting and fun. And it's a program that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources is really interested in promoting. So that's something that's really readily available, is to get some support for building a habitat in your schoolyard.
And then pretty similar to that, I haven't honestly touched base with this team in a while, but the Open Lands community, they do a lot with building school gardens. So I wonder if there could be some overlaps with what Amy was just sharing about, and then perhaps some more grant funding that could be available through Open Land. So I popped that into the chat. And then if you're interested in just following monarch migration, the Monarch Watch website helps to do some data visualization as well as some more interesting information about monarchs.
That's wonderful. We probably have time for one more question if anyone else would like to speak up or pop anything in the chat.
Hi, does the museum do any like place-based science education, like planning with teachers around units? Is that like a professional development you guys offer possibly?
Well, we have a few types of professional development. We have professional development that's integrated into our curriculum programs. And so our Science on the Go, right now it's remote Science on the Go, is curriculum and the professional development that goes along with that curriculum is an initial workshop initiating teachers to the curriculum itself, and then some classroom modeling in the classroom where the museum educator comes into the classroom, and right now it's virtual, but comes to the classroom and does one or more lessons from the curriculum. And so that's sort of the two ways that teacher professional development is integrated into that particular program. It's called Science on the Go. And then we also do custom PD for schools. So that's another thing that we offer as well, custom PD for schools.
Cool. Thank you.
I have one other question. Do you guys still do the trunks where you can sign out trunks, or is that canceled?
Well, while the building is closed, the Teacher Leadership Center, the TLC, is also closed. And so all of our resource kits, the TLC kits, all of those are not being circulated at this point. But hopefully once the building opens again, we'll be able to start lending those again.
I think the closest thing that I can think of in the interim between getting those kits out to you and your students is our Google Arts and Culture page. So it's a way to virtually explore our digital archives. So some really high quality images, and you can see all types of critters on there. So I'll pop that into the chat as well.
Good idea, Anna.
Wonderful. So I think we are right on time. I think we will wrap up. Kayla just popped a couple of helpful resources from the CFE standpoint into the chat. So if you want to take notice of those, and then Anna also added something into the chat as well. So Yukako and Amy, we are so thankful that you came and spoke with us today. I should mention that this is just the first of 3 community chats that the Notebaert Nature Museum is presenting for us over the next couple of months. So we have one November 18th, and then we have another one in January. So we will provide you, if we haven't already, with the link to all of our community chats, both the recordings of the 11, and including this one, 12 that we have already done, and then also all of the registration links for those that are upcoming. So we really encourage you to not only register and attend the 2 that we have coming up in November and January that will be led by the museum, but also bring a colleague or multiple colleagues along with you. So I thought today was really nice and interactive, and hopefully it sure seems like everyone got a lot out of it. So if you have any questions that weren't addressed today, and there are any things you would like to speak with CFE about, or you would like to connect with somebody from the museum about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Kayla or anyone on our CFE staff. We're happy to help. And that is about it for us. We're just so thankful for everything you have all been doing as educators in the past several months. You are complete rock stars, and we are so grateful to be in your presence and to be doing work that is supporting you and uplifting you, hopefully, and putting you at the forefront of everything that's going on. So we are incredibly grateful for all you do every day and continue to do. And just hope that you know that CFE is here for you. And, if you have ideas about future chats or other resources we could be promoting, or other programming we could be doing, we would love to hear from you. We're always open to new ideas. So Yukako, Amy, and Anna, thank you all for being here with us from the museum. And we cannot wait to talk to you again soon. So thank you all for joining, and have great nights.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.